All right, I am so excited for this episode because we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, fear. Okay, is it weird that I love talking about fear? Maybe, but I love talking about fear because it's this natural response that we have as humans that helps us to survive. And then when we let it completely rule our lives, it actually blocks us from living the life we want. So it's this paradox, and I love talking about it. Before we dive in with my amazing guest, I can't wait to introduce you to. Apologies, I'm sounding very nasally. I have a cold. I was just in Ireland and London for a week doing reinventability workshops with leaders and caught, I think all the rain and lack of sun got to me. So I'm sounding nasally in your ear today. My apologies. I have an amazing guest with me who has been inspiration to me personally as someone who talks about fear and courage and authenticity. And I cannot wait for this conversation. Her name is Michele Poehler. She is an international renowned keynote speaker, entrepreneur, expert in personal branding and community building. Michele is the founder of Hello Fears, which is a movement that has impacted more than 70 million people. Wow, I did not misstate that. That is 70 million. She has spoken at companies like Netflix and Microsoft and done a TEDx, and her work has been featured in every media outlet you can think of. Her book has been translated into 5 different languages. It's also called Hello Fears. And Michele also runs this incredible community called Créetelo, which is for Hispanic women and all about helping them connect to and live out their life's purposes. Michele, welcome to Reinventability. I'm so happy you're here.
Yay! So happy to be here. Can't wait.
Michele and I were just chatting offline how excited we are to be recording this podcast because it gives us an opportunity to connect. I'm sure all your busy listeners can relate. All right, I want to dive in, Michele, and it's probably the question you anticipate, but you started this project a while ago, a bunch of years ago, where you decided for 100 days to do 100 things that scare you. I've been thinking, I've known about it for years. What inspired you to do that?
Well, it was a series of, I think, and I can tell you about a series of things that led me to this point that I never in my life imagined that I could do. Like, I never, ever, ever even wanted to face a fear in my life. Okay, I actually quite the opposite. I was like, I can totally prove to the world that you can achieve all you want inside of your comfort zone. I am not going to get uncomfortable. Until I moved to New York City and things started to change. I did a master's in branding. At the master's in branding, I knew there was a 100-day project coming up. Everybody knows that when they go into that specific master's. And we are all the time thinking of ideas. What am I going to do for the 100-day project? And we knew that a few people have gone viral with that project. So it's like an exciting opportunity to do something. And because I was studying branding, I always thought I was going to do something branding related, like 100 logos or 100 brands or 100 something like that. And then the professor, actually the founder of the whole program, Debbie Millman, she said, do not get ahead of yourself. Do not think about that 100-day project. We're going to do a series of exercises that will lead you to that one, okay? It was impossible not to think about it, but still, she was so right. So the first exercise we did was to write our 10-year plan. We had to imagine everything was going according to plan, like all your dreams come true. Where do you see yourself 10 years from today? That sounds like a sort of like easy job to do, but it's so hard to dream big, like to actually challenge yourself to think, if you want to be famous, you'll be famous. If you want to be a millionaire, you'll be a millionaire. If you want to win the lottery, whatever it is, it happens. But still, even though, that was the challenge, I don't think that if you read my plan, which actually I wrote it 9 years ago, so it's almost the
Almost.
anniversary of that, yes. I was like, even though deep in my heart I wanted to be someone and achieve something huge, I didn't even dare to write that there. I was like, I'll
Mm.
create my own branding agency. I'll work with my husband. I'll work with great brands. But deep down, I knew I wanted more than that. I just didn't have the courage to write about it. But still, I wrote down things like I want to be on stage talking about my accomplishments and things like that, but as an expert in branding sort of way. And so after that exercise, we were all like excited about our next 10 years. And suddenly Debbie Millman, our professor, she said, okay, now you have to identify one crucial obstacle that could get in the way of your dream life. And I was like, motherhood, of course. What if I become a mom and I love it so much that I don't want to do that job anymore? But then I'm like, motherhood is a choice. It's not an obstacle. It's like a choice. Like, what's a
Mhm.
real obstacle that could prevent me from getting there? And I got really honest with myself, and I thought my unwillingness to face my fears is not my fears, it's my unwillingness to face my fears. The fact that I'm always staying in the comfort zone, and I'm not going to drive at night because that's very uncomfortable. So I might miss important events. I'm not going to start a conversation because that's really uncomfortable with, even I know that person, is someone that can open new doors for me. Nope, I'm staying in my comfort zone. So I thought about it. I'm like, if I continually stay in my comfort zone, I'm never going to achieve the success that I want to have. Suddenly, we watch Simon Sinek TEDx talk about why, right? The power of why, like what's your why? And I was like, what if I face 100 fears in 100 days? And then I was like, I don't know if this will be successful or not, but I have a feeling it will be, just because it has a true why. And the why is that I want to become a braver person. And not only for myself, I want to become a braver person for my family and for my future kids. So I was not a mom at that point. And I was like, I want to be able to give my kids the right example one day. And that's when I said, okay, I have an idea. And when I told that to my friends from the masters and my husband, everybody was on board. Everybody's like, you need to face your fears. Yes, it is time at your, I don't know, I think I was 26 at the time. So 26, 27, they're like, yeah, it's time for you to face your fears. I had a lot of support. And that's when I decided to commit to facing 100 fears in 100 days.
I love hearing the story, Michele. I've known about the project, but not the inspiration. And I love that you talked about having a powerful why, because I think that that is at the very, very core of like what actually allows us to face discomfort is when we have the why that we really care about. So I love the way you talk about that you just wanted to become a braver person, that it wasn't actually about, a branding agency or doing something specific on stage. It was you wanted to become a braver person. I love that. Okay, so I encourage everyone to go and we have the links in the show notes. Go check out the project. It's really inspiring. What was the lesson that you learned from doing things? And you did all kinds of things. Actually, you can mention some of them. One of the ones I remember watching, and you would post videos on YouTube. I remember watching like one where you ate an oyster and you were really like afraid of eating oysters. I think you went on a roller coaster. And then I remember there was one where you were posing nude in front of an art class. When I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I would never do that. So you did all kinds of things. What was the lesson that facing your fears taught you?
I think that one of the greatest lessons that I got from this experience is that I used to interpret the feeling of fear as my intuition trying to protect me and telling me that it's not the right way to go. So every time I thought about doing something that requires a little bit of courage, for example, let's say I was in college and the opportunity to study abroad in France came up, and I was like, I would be excited, and suddenly my fears would take over. And then I'm like, my intuition is telling me I shouldn't go. And then I would stay. So I never did those things. I never like did anything uncomfortable. I just really stayed in my comfort zone. And I was achieving so many things. I got married to the love of my life early, like, well, like I graduated as a graphic designer and art director. I found a really good job in advertising. Like, I was checking all the boxes and I was like, this is not that hard. I can check all the boxes, never leave my comfort zone. But I was not really living my life. Like, I was in autopilot. I realized that when you don't allow yourself to experience failure, you're not also like allowing yourself to experience life, right? And experience success, because you're just trying to like avoid all the time, avoid discomfort, avoid failure, avoid heartbreak, so that's not living. And so okay, I forgot the, oh yeah, so the lesson, big lesson.
Yeah.
And so yes, I would always thought, oh, my intuition, that's my intuition. And what I realized is it was never my intuition, it was always my fear. So I think it's really important to uh, like separate them. When is it really your intuition? Because it's important to listen to our intuition. And when is it really your fear? So the question I like ask myself is, if things go right, would I do it? Like, I'm about to send an email to maybe someone that can hire me or promote me or whatever, and I'm like, no, maybe it's not a good idea. And I'm what do we think about all the negative outcomes? Or
Yes.
like, they'll think I'm too needy, they'll think I'm too ambitious, they'll think all these things about me. But then we forget about the positive. Like, what if things go right? What if this person says, that's a great idea, what's your fee or whatever? Yes, I want to promote you. We've been thinking about that. Thank you for reminding me. Like, if the answer would be positive, would I do it? Yes. And so that's when I know it's not my intuition, it's just my fear. It happened to me recently. Like, a friend told me, can you come with me to an event about this amazing speaker that's coming to Miami, where I live? And I was like, I'm not sure, because there will be traffic at that time. Then it means that I won't put my son Noah to bed. Then all these things that are uncomfortable to me. And then I was about to say no. And then I'm like, wait, what if I love this speaker? What if I learn a lot? What if I, I don't know, run into people that I'm new contacts or whatever? And it was an amazing night. I'm so glad I went. And I'm like, my, it's always my fear. So
I
that's
love that, Michele, and I love that question, right? Because yeah, we all have, I talk about this a lot. We have this negativity bias in the brain. Our brain is always focusing on what could go wrong, what's negative. That's the fear trying to help us survive, right? That's a biological function of fear. But that means we have to be really intentional about thinking about, like, what are the good things? What if this goes right? So I love that question as almost like a guiding mechanism. Like, if this goes well, would I do it? If the answer is yes, then it's worth the risk that it might not, right? So the thing that, when I think about fear, I also love the way you talk about fear, like when it was preventing you from living your life fully. I think that's really powerful, because the way that I think about fear motivates us away from doing certain things, right? And sometimes it's the right thing, like don't eat a poisonous mushrooms, or because you don't know what it's like, or don't walk in front of a screeching car that's speeding towards you. Like, that's survival. But so much, if we let it kind of dominate us, it keeps us from doing things, right? From doing new things, from expanding, because we don't want to risk feeling uncomfortable or rejected or failing, or someone is judging us in a weird way. And so I often think about, and I'd love your thoughts on this. Like, I often think about, we either make choices out of fear or we make them out of hope. Because hope is not blind optimism. Like, I spent the last couple of years totally going down the rabbit hole of like the science of hope. Hope means that we think the future can be better and we have a role in making it happen, right? No guarantees that things will work out. So I often think, like, that's the question I ask myself. Am I making this choice from fear or hope? Right. So I wonder how you think about that. And I'd love for you to talk about, like, how do we change? How do we make that inner shift when we actually realize, okay, I am in fear. Now what?
Yeah. The way that I think about it is, I stopped even calling it fear and started calling it comfort. Because what I realized is that the enemy of success, you would think, is failure, right? A lot of people think, oh, yeah, the enemy of success is failure, but it's actually comfort, not even fear, it's comfort. When you're in a good enough job and you're like, I want more out of life, but I'm comfortable here, that's dangerous. When we're in comfort, it is dangerous. It's not even fear. It's just that, and it's so frustrating now that I see it, to talk to people that are in their most comfortable stage, but they talk about their dreams. And when I tell them, like, so when are you going to write the book or do that thing or ask for that promotion? Then they're like, oh, but I can't complain about what I have. They treat me well here. I'm like, that's so dangerous. What's happening? I wish they were treating you bad so you could actually go and do what you want to do, right?
That's
And
right.
so, I label it as comfort. And the way that I perceive the world now is, every choice we make is either comfort or growth. You can't do the same at the same time. You're either choosing growth or you're choosing comfort, right? And so comfort is what keeps us where we are while the rest of the world is moving forward. So we think that when we're choosing comfort, we're staying in the right place, but actually we're moving backwards.
That's right.
Because if
That's
you're
right.
staying and the whole world is moving forward, you're moving backwards. So that is scary. So, what is scarier for you, to stay where you are or to take that risk? And yes, it may not be successful, but you'll learn so much. That's so I always ask myself, what is the scariest thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I used to run away from the scariest thing to do, and now I run towards that because it helps me identify where my growth path is.
Yes.
Growth
Yes.
is always the scariest option. I now finally understand that, and now I feel like I have the courage to choose that with fear. I'm not fearless. I thought that was the goal of the project. Like, I used the hashtag fearless from the beginning. I bought like fake tattoos that said fearless. I put them on and all of that. Like, I had this entire fearless campaign until one day I was like, I'm never going to be fearless. I still experience the same fear from the first day. I'm just now willing to do these things with fear. So it started really bothering me when people call me fearless and say, "Oh,
Mm.
fearless friend." And I'm like, when you refer to me as fearless, means that I don't have fear. Fearless. I have so much fear. I'm way more afraid than you are, but at the same time, I'm doing it, which means I'm brave, not fearless.
I think that is such an important thing to say, Michele, because, I experience the same. A lot of people tell me, because as you're talking, I'm reflecting on like things I've done. I've done a lot of things that I was scared to do, but I think I've intrinsically always been afraid to stand still. It's so interesting you talking about that's like the comfort is the dangerous thing. I'm smiling because I wrote an email to my community a couple of weeks ago, and the subject line was the risk of standing still for that same reason, right? If we're standing still and the universe is expanding around us, then we're actually kind of going backwards. But I think I've always had this like inner discomfort with standing still. And so I've done scary things, but not because I don't have fear. It's
Mm-hmm.
just because something else is more important to me. And I think that like circles back to having the bigger why
Yeah.
is when you feel the fear, well, the way to move towards what you want, even with the fear, is to make sure it's really important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's like that big, I call the bigger why becomes your bridge, like the bridge through the fear. So I'd love for you to talk about, because I think that brings us to connecting courage and authenticity.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right. So I'd love for you to talk about how being true to yourself, how being authentic, how that actually helps you to have more courage. Because I think that link is something we miss sometimes.
And a lot of people ask me that, like, so should I face all of my fears, or how do I choose the fears I should face? And I'm like, definitely not. You have to pick the fears that are aligned to where you want to be in your life. So that's why that exercise about where do you want to be in 10 years or 5 years is actually so important, so relevant. Because if we don't know where we want to be, then we don't know which fears to face, and you might end up facing a lot of fears that don't take you where you want to be, and then you'll end up experiencing a lot of comfort but not happiness. And that's a huge like realization I had in my like with myself when I was like right before moving to New York to do all this master and everything. I was like 23, 24, and I was like, I already have a really nice apartment, I'm married, and I already have a really good job. Is this what life is all about? Like, what's next? I just have to have kids and then buy a house and then what, have grandkids, and then what's next? Like dying? Like, I don't get it. I asked that to my therapist. I'm like, and I started experiencing like mild panic attacks because I was like, what's life about? Like, I feel I already achieved a lot by 24 and I'm way too comfortable for a 24-year-old.
Mm.
And then my therapist was like, you always talk about New York, what about moving to New York? And I'm like, no, like that's so expensive. And then my husband's a financial analyst, so he's like, I was like, he will never support me on moving to New York. And then she's like, it's your dream, like you have to pursue your dreams. And I'm like, wow, I never like had the push, I guess, to think about that in that way. And then I had the conversation with him and I was like, what do you need for us to move to New York? And he said, okay, I need you to show me that we can save, that we can do all this, that you can help me with this and that. And I'm like, okay, we'll do it. And then we moved to New York, and that was so aligned to my purpose. And that's where my story starts. I knew New York could change my life, and it did.
Mm.
So, if we want to face our fears, first we have to ask ourselves, what do we want? and I only face a few. A lot of people like would go through a whole career in college for like lawyer or dentist or whatever because that's what their parents want for them, and they go through all this struggle and discomfort for somebody else. So the question that I ask myself now before adding anything to my checklist, things that I want to accomplish, is if I achieve this but I can't share it with anybody, would it still make me happy?
That's a great question.
Yeah, we only have to do things that would make us happy even if no one knows about it, because it happens the same when I was 30 and I thought about having kids, and I was like, everybody's pressuring me, I want my parents to be grandparents, I want to give them that joy, but I was like, if I do this and I can't share it with anybody, would it still make me happy? And I'm like, no, I would be doing this just to please other people or fit in or impress or whatever, but not because that's what I want. And so I waited a few more years.
I love that, Michelle. And I think I work with a lot of people who are really successful, right? Like they would describe their life kind of like you did, like have a great job, have a family, have a house or an apartment that I love. Like things seem fine. And then they say, but I feel like something is missing. And the thing that turns out to be missing, and these are very different people, right? Like I work with executives at companies, entrepreneurs, authors, like all kinds of different people. The thing that is usually missing is growth and expansion towards like something they want in the future. And one of the interesting things I mentioned, I was just in Ireland doing these reinventability workshops with these leaders. And when you talk about reinvention, people think the future, right? Like, oh, I'm going to reinvent the future. But the first place we start is I ask them to reflect on things like, what do you love to do? What makes you truly happy? And a lot of people get stuck there because I feel like we don't live in a culture where we're asked those questions a lot, right? We think about like, oh, what should I do? Like, what should I do with my life? So I'd love for you to talk more about, again, like how can we tune in to more of what is truly meaningful to us? Like, how can we get more honest with ourselves about what we want when there's a lot of input that we're getting from people who love us, right? I don't mean it malicious, like from our parents, from like I've grown up like my parents wanted certain things. So like how can we tap into more of that like authentic, genuine want versus this is what I think I should do?
Mhm. One of the things that I love to do is that, and I realized this just last year, is that I'm constantly showing my life, my choices, my lifestyle, right? And I was always like, why do I feel that need to always share?
Mm.
What am I doing? How am I decorating my home? What am I wearing? Like all these things, what am I eating? And I realized that I'm constantly like living my own definition of success and challenging people through my own just life to reflect about theirs. For example, as I was building my home where I'm right now, I started painting all the walls, not only in my office, that if I show you with this, you'll see every wall is in a different color or
It's
texture,
amazing.
but even my living room, my kitchen, like I went like bold with absolutely everything. Like the living room, the colors of the couches, one yellow, one dark blue, one like the what's it called, the carpet with pink, and like the walls everywhere, the kitchen is like blue. Like I started putting all these things, and then people started thinking, wow, if I would like redesign my home, how would I do it my way? Same with like how I dress up with my outfits. When I start wearing this like bright bold colors, right, not hiding anything, just putting it like standing out and feeling confident about that, people start thinking, wow, would that color look good in me? What kind of color would I wear if I would have the courage to wear something else than a little black dress for an event like this,
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like just my experience is helpful for other people in that way. And one of the things I also did is in my book, Hello Fears, I have a series of questions that I ask people. Like, for example, if you would live anywhere in the world, where would that be? If you could work at, change your career, what would that be? If you would have the, ability to go back to college, what would you actually study right now? So if you would surround yourself with, a different group of people, who would that be? So those questions that people don't really tend to ask themselves, But it's a space for them to look inside and just, be free in your mind, at least for that time. And then we can think, oh yes, but I'm married, but I have kids, but all these things.
Yes.
Yeah, because I for me it's frustrating, the what's it called, the crisis, middle age crisis. Why people need to have middle age crisis at 60 or 70, and why not at 20? I feel like I had mine at 20, 26, when I said, okay, I'm going to go to New York, do all these things, and started thinking about me first. I think that's so
Mm,
important. And it's funny because I'll say something very controversial here, but Simon Sinek has his book, Leaders Eat Last.
yeah.
I listened to him speak on stage when I was just starting my career, like before becoming a speaker. And I thought, I'm the worst leader. I will never be a leader because I always eat first.
Uh-huh.
I can't lead with an empty stomach.
Yeah, of
I need
course.
to be okay
Yeah.
myself in order to lead. And I really thought I was never going to be a leader after hearing that talk. And then after that, my project exploded. And, it's been almost 10 years. And I am a different kind of leader. And I feel I need to be okay and fulfill my own definition of success and then lead, by example also.
Yeah, I think Michelle, I'm discovering so many threads that overlap between us. I think there's a line in my book, The Awesome Human Project, where I have a chapter on leadership where I write about that. And I say, great leaders actually eat first, because how great are you at leading others if you are depriving yourself of what brings you joy? Because I was a terrible leader in that. I spent a 20-year career in tech leading teams. I shouldn't judge myself so harshly. Maybe not a terrible leader. I wasn't as great of a leader as I could have been because I was so focused on never thinking about myself. And I deprived myself of a lot of things that brought me joy. And the outcome of that was that there wasn't as much of me to give to others. So I love that. And I also just, I think the point around where asking, like, I love those open-ended questions, like about thinking bigger. One of the things that I find we tend to do is, as soon as we start to think big, like, the constraints come in, right? Like, oh, but, well, I really want to write a book, but, right? The buts come in, but, or I really want to go for that more senior role at the company, but, and the constraints come in. And one of my favorite expressions, I actually don't know who said this. I read it in a book once. It wasn't attributed. I think you'd love this. And it said, we didn't invent ships by observing things that sink. We invented ships by observing things that float. And to me, it really speaks to this fact that first we have to dream. We have to really think like blue sky, no constraints. What would you do with no constraints? And then, like, first think about the what, and then we can think about the how. And I think that's so much of what you speak about, and to do that within, right? So, like, to actually look within and think about, what do I want, before we start thinking about, oh, here's 7 ways I can do it. All right, I have one last question to wrap up with. So you faced 100 fears. What was the worst for you? Like, what was the hardest one for you that you faced? And maybe I'd love to know, is it still there, or did you, like, get rid of that one?
So, to be honest, the worst fear is the one you haven't faced over and over again. So, every day I would wake up and think, today I'm going to die, facing this fear. And yes, my world as I know it, and then I would face the fear and I would think, oh, it was not that bad. Tomorrow, I'm going to die. I can't, like, yeah, it will happen, I'm sure. So every single day, imagine doing that for 100 days. Gets to a point where you're like, wow, it's never, ever as bad as I have it in my head. Every single day, I thought this was going to be the worst one. You're talking to a really fearful person here. Like, I'm afraid to, like, drive at night, try certain foods, like be by myself in general, just be by myself, and not even talk about travel by myself. That's like another level. I haven't even done that. No, yes, no, not even as a speaker. I always travel with someone. Like, yes, I am afraid of so many things, like getting a piercing, getting a Brazilian wax, like all this, everything. So I started labeling my fears, and I realized I only had 7 fears, not 100, but you can face those 7 fears in a million ways. But yes, fear will always seem bigger. It's like those, like a shadow. That's how I picture it, like a huge shadow that the more you get closer to it, the smaller and smaller and smaller you get. And then yes, there are a lot of things I did that I didn't like, but they were not, like, I can tell you roller coaster was as horrible as I had it in my head. And that was sad because I was really hopeful that finally I was going to like roller coasters and my life was going to be fun and be part of the group that likes roller coasters.
Yeah.
But nope, I hated them. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know why people do this. I really hate it.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of things that I was terrified. And then, like, even holding a tarantula, that was not even part of my list when I started. And then one day I visited my brother in Savannah, and his roommate had a tarantula. I was like, okay, the universe is talking to me. I need to face this fear. So I hold it. It was actually fun. I didn't mind having that tarantula on. And I was like, I can't believe this was not even in my list. But yes, expectations play a huge role in fear. We just really have to do things before we decide if we like them or not. At the end of the day, it's not that I'm still afraid of roller coasters, it's that I know 100% I don't like them, and that's it.
This might surprise you or not, but I'm with you. I went on my first roller coaster in 8th grade, just after we came to America as refugees, and my school went. And I'd never been on a roller coaster. We didn't have them in Russia. And I wasn't even afraid of it because I didn't really know what to be afraid of. But I went on that huge one at first, and I got off it, and I was like, why is everyone happy? That was terrible. I'm not doing that again. I'm going to eat Dippin' Dots ice cream. And that's why I like Six Flags Great Adventure, because they have Dippin' Dots, and I thought it was heaven. But I don't enjoy roller coasters, so I don't get it. But like, my daughter loves them. But it's so weird to me that people love getting nauseous like that in the air. So I totally get that. The biggest fear is the fear you haven't faced yet. That's such a great reminder. Michele, thank you for you. Thank you for being you, like you with a capital YOU. Everyone should go follow Michele on Instagram and LinkedIn. We have links in the show notes, because you are so deeply true to who you are, and that in itself is so deeply inspiring. So thank you for being you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights so openly and warmly with us. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in and watching. If you're watching, I love being in your ear, and I appreciate you connecting with us. That is all for our episode today. I will see and be in your ear next week with our next episode of Reinventability.